Well, what's up, guys? So we are closing out the Loveology series tonight, and I'm very excited about what we're going to be going into next week. We're going to begin our new series. Actually, this coming up Tuesday, we have a special Easter service that y'all are going to hear more about, a way for y'all to pass out flyers here at the end. I would love for you guys to try to invite somebody. It's going to be a great outreach night for someone to hear just the message of the cross and what Jesus did for us and accomplished for us. It's going to be a special Good Friday, really, worship service, looking forward towards Easter Sunday. But then the next week, I'm excited about starting our new series, Always Tired, which this is the kind of time in the semester where a lot of us, would y'all say amen to that? You're feeling pretty tired. Yeah, so it's actually a series about the rest that God offers us and how do we live in rest when we are in such a restless culture, and sometimes we find restlessness in ourselves. And so I'm excited about that. But tonight we're going to be in Song of Songs chapter 5 and 6. So if you have a Bible, I invite you to grab it and turn there with me. And as you're turning there, so there's certain things that just cause conflict, right? Like it's naturally going to cause conflict. One of them, it's a conversation, an argument that's been had by many people, and it's this conversation: Whataburger or In-N-Out Burger? Whataburger or In-N-Out? So who here would say In-N-Out Burger? In-N-Out Burger. They all sat together. Are y'all from California? Is that where y'all are from? Okay, so who here would say Whataburger? Yes and amen. Okay. So can you really be Texan if your answer isn't Whataburger? That's you know where I land. So what about this one? Let's just get real honest here tonight. So Democrat or Republican? Oh, do y'all feel the tension? Like it happens. So who here is going to say Democrat? Who's going to be Democrat? Okay, we got a few of us in here. Who's going to be? Let's go Libertarian. So anybody, okay? So for the Libertarians, unfortunately, the vote doesn't really count yet because we're still in a two-party system. We're trying to see if that'll, change. But then we'd say who leans Republican as far as their political views, okay? So there's a lot of tension around this, and of course there's a lot of tension in some of the intersection that it has with some really serious issues and stuff like that, that people have different views on and different reasons why they have the stance they do. But man, there's a lot of conflict in politics, and I kind of feel like our political parties, they love it. I feel like there's just more and more conflict as the years go by, but it definitely causes conflict. And then what about this one? So this one's just for me. So cereal before the milk or milk before the cereal? Who would say cereal before the milk? Okay. Is there anybody that would say milk before the cereal? Those people are serial killers, okay? So, serial killer. See what I did there? Okay. But the reason why I start with that is because in marriage, so there's things in our lives that are going to cause conflict just in general. And a lot of what we're going to be covering tonight, it's not just about our future marriages or the dating relationship that we're in that's heading towards that direction. But in general, and just all of our relationships and things, how can we have conflict in a way that's biblical, in a way that's actually healthy for us? That's what we're going into tonight. But in marriage, there's going to be conflict. So, for instance, who here are the clean freaks? That you are a clean freak, okay? Who here that would say, I am messy and I know it? I'm messy and I know it. Okay, so that's not written in my notes. But so there's the clean freaks, and then there's the messy people, and then who here are the natural savers? Like you save all your money. Financially, you are a saver. Okay, who here is like, man, let's spend it? Y'all like, I got $1 and I'm going to buy a pack of gum with my last dollar just because I have it. Okay, 107, borrow it from the take a penny, and I'm good to go. Okay, and so there's natural ways that you're going to have conflict in your marriages, in your dating relationships, based on just the way that we are, the quirks and all the different things that we bring into two personalities coming together to share a life. That's the ultimate goal of dating is an interview process to try to figure out if this person is somebody that you actually want to commit your life to spending with them the rest of your life. That's biblically what dating should be. And anything outside of that purpose, you're kind of wasting your time and giving a lot of room for pain and hurt in your life. And we've talked about that in this series. But a lot of us, man, as we talk about conflict, it's so crucial that we get these extremely important truths, because I believe that almost all of us are going to be married in this room and have families of our own one day. That's probably a desire for most people statistically in this room, and it's going to happen for most people in this room. And so as you step into that in marriage, in your future, as some of us sooner rather than later, but how you deal with conflict will be the make or break for your marriage. It will. How you deal with conflict will be what dictates how you are going to be in the rest of your life together. Will you be in love 20 years from now? Or will you have all the little things stack up that cause you to be separated? And man, so there's a lot riding on understanding this and just how important this is for us to get these extremely practical truths this evening. And maybe you're like me, and growing up, you saw conflict resolution not done very well. And so for me, my dad, I saw him he was a yeller and a screamer. And I never saw him physically abuse a woman, but I saw him mentally break women down over and over and over again. And that's just the reality that I saw happen, and I had a front row seat to it. And whenever I was thinking about getting engaged with Carrie and we were getting serious about dating, I was thinking, man, like, I don't want to be like that. And what scared me even more is I knew that, like, I have that hot temper bent where I could easily become that way if I'm not careful. And I was going, okay, so I'm kind of scared to be like my dad in that sense. And then on my mom's side, like, man, my whole mom's side of the family, all of us, like, we're all great at holding grudges. Anybody come from a family where you're like, man, we hold the grudge with the best of them, and that is my family background. We've seen family splits and all that other kind of stuff because we cannot just have conflict resolution in a way that is healthy. And you know that you're bad at holding a grudge, or your family is, whenever you talk to them and you're like, oh, what about this person? Like, oh, we don't talk. And you're like, okay, well, why? Well, there's something happened. And you're like, what? And they're like, it was so long ago, I don't even know, but it was bad. And you're like, you don't even remember, but you're still angry. And so we don't want to be that way. And for some of us in the room, we've seen our parents. I've had conversations every single semester with students that they sit down and they're going, I'm trying to make sense of the fact that my parents are getting divorced after being together for 20 plus years, and they just told me and my siblings that they're separating, and it's because they quit fighting for each other. In conflict resolution and all those things added up, and it led to a separation. And so tonight's going to be helpful, I believe, for all of us. As we go into this couple that they get married, and it's after their honeymoon. And so after the honeymoon, we're going to see that they have this conflict, and we're going to see how they work through this in a way that we can learn from. And some of it might not make sense because it is an ancient poem, but God put this in here so we could get some key truths and principles for our lives. But it begins in chapter 5, verse 2. And the first point, it's kind of a duh statement because we're going to see them have a conflict. Conflict will happen. It's guaranteed to happen for all of us, and that's why God put it in this scripture for us, because in a fallen world, it's going to happen. But she says this in verse 2 in this poem, I slept, but my heart was awake. A sound, my beloved is knocking. Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is wet with dew, my locks with the drops of the night. And then she says, I had put off my garment. How could I put it back on? I had bathed my feet. How could I soil them? And so what most theologians believe, or a good portion of theologians believe this is talking about, is he was basically out working late at night or doing something that kept him out late, and she had already gone to sleep, and he comes to their home, and he's trying to get into their room, and apparently she's frustrated, and he wants to sleep with his wife. He wants some snuggy time. And so he's trying to have sex with his wife. And so he says, hey, are you up? And she gives him the cold shoulder and says, like, no, I'm tired. And basically today that would be like the man working really, really late, coming home. His wife has already went to sleep, and he walks in and is like, hey, are you awake? And she goes, no. Maybe, and he's like, you sure? Not a chance. And then she says, maybe if you were here earlier, maybe this could have happened tonight, but because you were out so late. And what you would expect, and this is where conflict starts to happen, is because this is a place of conflict for a lot of people. So you might expect for this guy, this groom, to say, oh, okay, I'm sorry I was out, working, providing a living. Would you like me to get you another pillow for the bed that I bought? Or would you like some food in the refrigerator that I provided? But that's not how he responds. That's bad. Like if you're like, hey, I'm writing that down. Don't write that down. That's not how you want to respond. That's not going to go well for you. But that might be how you expect him to respond, but that's actually not how he responds. He responds, I would say beginning, he responds in a positive way, but we see how it kind of goes negative as he is distanced from her for a while, apparently. And so it says, my beloved put his hand to the latch, and my heart was thrilled within me. Not thrilled in like a good way, like a thumping, like we're about to have an argument. I arose to open to my beloved, so she changed her mind. And my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the bolt. That's confusing. We'll talk about that in a second. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned and gone. My soul failed when he spoke. I sought him, but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. The watchmen found me as they went about in the city. And this is, by the way, she is basically going to an emotional 10. So this is a poem, remember? So this isn't actually happening, but she feels beat up, so she's expressing it in this way. She says, they beat me, they bruised me, they took away my veil, those watchmen of the walls. And then she says, where is he? Where's my beloved? If that you tell him I am sick with love. And so in this conflict that they're having, you see that she is a boiler. There's two types of people. There's boilers and there's bottlers. And she's a boiler. So for boilers, these are the people, like I'm a boiler. These are people that the longer that the conflict sits and it's unaddressed, the more worked up we get. And this is what happens for her. So she thinks about it, then she gets up, and then she goes on this search, and now she's freaking out. Or maybe in a frustration conflict that you're having where you're actually angry, this like you're going to just sit, and the longer that you wait until it's addressed, you're going to start to boil over, and it just gets worse and worse, and you get more heated and more heated. Who here would say, I'm a boiler? Who's our boilers in the room? Okay, and so he is more of a bottler. So he leaves, and then he goes away from her as she's searching for him, and he pushes, bottlers, what they do is they push it all down inside. And bottlers, the good thing about bottlers, they tend to be a little bit more gentle in the actual conflict. And there's some good things about that. But the negative side of a bottler is, man, you can be passive aggressive, like with the best of them. Who here is laughing because you are the bottler? Yes. Yes, so if you didn't raise your hand, I don't know what you are, but you can let me know later on. But there are boilers and there are bottlers, and by the way, the boiler, we can tend to be kind of snappy, kind of wear our feelings on our sleeve and kind of say whatever is coming through our minds in the moment, and that's not awesome. Speaking from experience. But this is what happens, and so there's a boiler and there's a bottler, and a lot of times these people marry each other. It's been said that opposites attract and then attack, okay? And so it's true, and we kind of see this in this picture, but conflicts are going to happen, and conflict, what happened here is conflict happened because the expectation that he had wasn't met. So sometimes conflict happens because the expectation isn't met, and sometimes it happens because of the small things. So last week, not knowing that I was preaching on this, my wife sent me this. Will you put that picture up there? So that's my wife sending it to me. My wife's passive-aggressively piling the trash like Jenga until you take it out. That is our marriage, okay? And so every single time, I feel like she's trying to see how high she can get the trash. So I have to take every piece off, just going, I just love her so much. To get ready, and I'm like, okay. And then she's like, what, it's your job to take out the trash? And I'm like, I took it out like 90 minutes ago. How much trash can our family produce in a trip to the gym and back? I don't understand how this happened. But sometimes it's the little things that add up, right? And so we have these conflicts that are going to rise in our lives. And the reason why I think it's so key to point out that there is a conflict going on is because people sometimes think that the goal in your relationships and the goal in your marriage in the future is that you would not fight. And I would say that's actually not the goal. The goal is that you would fight fair. That you would fight fair. Not that you won't have conflict, but that you will have it in a way that it produces something healthy instead of something toxic. And so that's why we're covering this. And let's continue reading. Verse 9. So the others, as she's seeking him out, they say, "What is your beloved more than another beloved, O most beautiful among women? What is your beloved more than another beloved, that you should thus adjure us?" And then she responds, talking about how amazing he is. And she says, "My beloved is radiant and ruddy," and goes on to describe just how beautiful he is as a person. And talks about his head and his eyes, and goes down and talks about his cheeks and his lips and his arms and his body and his legs and his appearance. And just says he's a beautiful person, like what she believes about him. And then ends in verse 16. We'll pick it back up. She says, "His mouth is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem." And then the others respond, "Where has your beloved gone, O most beautiful among women? Where has your beloved turned, that we may seek him with you?" And she responds and says, "My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the bed of spices, to graze in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. He grazes among the lilies." So she figures out where he's at. She goes in, they have this conversation, and this is where they have their interaction. He responds by saying, "You are beautiful as Tirzah, my love, lovely as Jerusalem." I'm going to talk about that here later. "Awesome as an army with banners. Turn away your eyes from me, for they overwhelm me. Your hair is like a flock of goats leaping down the slopes of Gilead." So we covered this a couple weeks ago. He's repeating the same things that he said to her on their wedding night. And he's saying, "The same things I said to you then, I still believe about you now." None of that has changed, even though we're in this conflict. And then he says, "Your teeth are like a flock of ewes." Listen, guys, don't tell your girl that her teeth is a flock of any animal. Like, that's not going to work out. It says, "That have come up from washing. All of them bear twins. Not one of them has lost its young," basically celebrating that all her teeth are there. "Your cheeks are like halves of a pomegranate behind your veil." And then he says, "There are 60 queens and 80 concubines and virgins without number. And my dove, my perfect one, is the only one. You are still the only one for me," even though we're kind of in the middle of this tough moment. Pure to her who bore her. The young women saw her and called her blessed. The queens and concubines also, and they praised her. Who is this who looks down like the dawn, beautiful as the moon, bright as the sun, awesome as an army with banners?" Like, bro, those are some bars right there. Like, guys, you want to write that down later on to your girl. Good stuff. And she responds, "I went down to the nut orchard to look at the blossoms of the valley, to see whether the vines had budded, whether the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I was aware, my desire set me among the chariots of my kinsman, a prince, saying, I honor you as royalty." And then the others respond and say, "Return, return, O Shulamite." And some theologians say that this is probably the feminine form of Solomon, so trying to celebrate the fact that they are one. "Return, return, that we may look upon you." And then he responds and says, "Why should you look upon the Shulamite as upon a dance between two armies?" He ends by asking this rhetorical question, saying, "Hey, we are not separate, but we are on the same team. We're not enemies, but we are together in this." And I think there's so many things for us to gather here, but we'll begin. Obviously, we talked about conflict is going to happen, and we see the conflict take place, and we see him leave, and she's boiling over, but there's this act that he does, and he doesn't respond in a negative way. He actually meets conflict with kindness, and that's the next point this evening, that how do you deal with conflict? You meet conflict with kindness. Where do we get that? Verse 5. So it says that she arose to open to my beloved, and My hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the bolt. Now, that's interesting for us to hear and kind of weird, but that basically would have been his cologne that he would have sprayed on the door handle. And though it's kind of weird in our culture, in this culture, spraying your cologne or perfume on the door would have made sense. Get it? Because it's cologne scents. Okay, that's cringeworthy, but I did write that down, and I'm not ashamed. But it would have made sense because in this culture, what that meant was you would have done that as a symbol that a lover had been where they sprayed their perfume or their cologne, that he was trying to get her to have a response of understanding his love, and that she would respond to that through the scent that would have made its way to her as she would have smelled that, and it actually worked. And so I'm not saying that you need to go and start spraying doorknobs whenever you get in fights. That would be a little awkward. But what I am saying is that, man, there's a lesson for us in this, that whenever we see someone respond to us in a way that, man, expectations were not met, what if we responded in kindness instead of responding with retaliation or revenge? Because I think a lot of people, they want to meet this conflict or this thing that hurt me or bothered me or came against me with some sort of retaliation or revenge, or we want to hold the grudge. And man, honestly, you don't want to marry that person, and you don't want to be that person that somebody marries. And what happens is we get in these fights, and people start to use that thing that they know about you that's going to hurt you, because the closer that you get, the more that you're going to be vulnerable with somebody. And this is not only true with a relationship, but this as far as a romantic relationship, but this is true with our friendships as well and family. And so you people, we learn to say that one thing that's, man, it's going to be like a bullet going out of a gun that's going to wound that person. And I think some of us have experienced that to us, and some of us have experienced being the one that said that thing. And man, we don't want to go into relationships in that kind of way. And if you find yourself holding on to that bitterness or holding that grudge or immediately seeking retaliation and revenge, I would present to you this, that there's probably places in your life that are wounds that need to be healed. And I'm telling you that Jesus can heal those. But you need to address those things. Don't bring those unaddressed wounds into your future marriages one day. And it's been said, and I think it's a very true statement: hurt people hurt people. So when you find yourself being hurt over and over and over again by somebody, or you are that person, then there's probably wounds that person's dealing with that God just still hasn't healed because they haven't surrendered over that piece to Him yet. And I'm just presenting to us all to go, man, if that's going on, would you consider saying, Jesus, will you heal me? And will you heal this other person that's coming from? But we want to meet conflict with kindness, and man, when we don't, it leads to a toxic environment, and that none of us want a marriage like that. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 9 actually says this: it is better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. And so I'm just thinking, like, it's a pretty funny picture if you think about it. Like, I'm thinking about going over to one of my buddy's house and seeing a blanket up on the corner of the roof, and I'm like, why is there a blanket up there? And he's like, oh, that's where I sleep now. I'd be like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, I can't take it anymore, so I live up there. That would be so. I'd be like, man, I got an extra room if you need one right now. But he's saying, like, that's the picture, that it is that bad. Like, you would rather live on the corner of a housetop than to have someone that's always fighting. And this is going to be the person, the quarrelsome wife. What is that? This is the person that, like, just never lets anything go. So like, have y'all ever been with those people that, or maybe you've dated them, maybe you have been this person, where every fight and every argument over something specific, for some reason, leads to every other fight and argument you've ever had? So it starts with, hey, you didn't text me. And you're like, oh, yeah, we got to talk about that, because she's upset I didn't text her. And then it becomes, well, you know what? I bet that you didn't text me, but I bet you texted your friends back, because that other time that I went through your phone and I saw that you had texted all your friends and not me. Remember when we had that conversation? And now you're talking about that. And then she's like, by the way, a year ago, remember when Miss So-and-so texted you? Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that one. And you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Everything's all like I thought was one thing, but now there's four. This isn't what you want. Like, this is not the kind of marriage or dating relationship that you want. In Proverbs chapter 29, it talks about specifically the man. Proverbs 29, verse 22 says, "A man of wrath stirs up strife, and one given to anger causes much transgression." So in dating, this is going to be the guy that's quick to anger, a guy that yells. And man, like a guy that's raising his voice and yelling, man, like it's a way that usually men, we don't realize this sometimes, but our girlfriends, or for me, my wife, would feel like I'm trying to dominate her because of my presence. I'm stronger than her, bigger than her. And man, that's not a healthy thing. And that's what happens in anger when you start to yell, like, man, you want to address that quick. Or it's the person that's controlling. This is the person that's going to tell you what you can wear and what you can't wear, and who you can go with, and how long you can be with them. And man, this is going to be the jealous type. Man, those are red flags. Red flags, and you want to address those quickly. Because I'm telling you that if a guy's trying to control you in dating, he's going to try to control you in marriage. And man, like that doesn't sound like a trust of a marriage, a trustworthy thing that's building on the foundation of a love that's pure. And so, man, you want to address that stuff. But, man, and maybe if that's you, you go, okay, how can I address some of this in me? Because I know it's tough to be alone and to be searching for somebody. And I know that many of us in here are probably single. And we want to be in a relationship. And sometimes we find ourselves settling for somebody we know is not God's best. And it becomes one of these types of people. But you stay in it. But I just want to tell you that it might be tough to be alone and single, but you know what's tougher than being alone and single is to be alone and married. And so we want to get this right. We want to get this right. We want to be like this guy. He does not lash out at her. He does not threaten her. Instead, he does this act of kindness. He leaves his fragrance on the doorknob in that culture, which had that meaning, and then he left. And I think there's something for us to learn here, that we would meet conflict with kindness. And so in conflict, what does this look like for us? And we're going to talk about this more in just a second. But man, from the get-go in a conflict, and this is true with not only dating, but this is true in all our relationships, like acknowledge the care and the love that you have for each other from the beginning. Acknowledge that foundation. But we want to meet conflict with kindness, and then the next point is that we want to meet conflict immediately. And so this is the positive side of the boiler, is that she wants to get things made right, and she wants to get it done quickly, and she's feeling all beat up until she does. And man, I talked with one guy that he said that as he was studying this passage, it actually dawned on him that the problem from him was not in his relationships, was not that he argued or had conflict too often, but actually too few times. That he says, I didn't have conflict enough. And so what happens is he was the bottler. He bottled it up. And what happens when we bottle it up, eventually it gets to this breaking point where you're going to have this kind of explosive argument where things end, is what we talked about. Or it's just going to be one little thing after another little thing after another little thing, and they all just get pushed down and pushed down and pushed down into this thing that's inside of us. And you can only feel that so much until it breaks and the relationship is not going to be fixed. And by the way, this is the reason, unaddressed conflict is the reason why 15, 20, 25 years into marriage, there's people that call it quits. It's because it's hardly ever just one thing. It's all the little things that became big things, because little things become big things when they're unaddressed. It's all the miscommunication. It's the lack of talking to one another. And man, a lack of communication, it is the lifeblood of conflict. It is. So we got to learn to communicate, and we want to solve this conflict. We want to meet conflict immediately. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26 says this. It says that we are to not let the sun go down while you are still angry. It says, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. Now, as a boiler, I had always talked, and I had taught it this way, and I had also talked with Carrie this way, that as a boiler, I thought that that was my verse to say, see, we got to deal with it like right now, immediately. My wife is a bottler, and it took me a while to realize that as a bottler, we had to, again, and me being a boiler, we had to kind of meet in the middle, and I had to understand, like, hey, she might need some time to process here, but I'd be like, well, what about the don't let the sun go down thing? Like, we got to solve this right here, right now, and I think that there's some truth to that, but I think that's part 2 of what this verse is actually teaching. And then it dawned on me what this verse is actually saying, because it says, don't let the sun go down while you are still angry. Meaning, it was on me, first of all, to deal with this before me and God. Step 1 is between me and God to choose that I'm going to forgive her before I ever step into the conflict resolution conversation. God's like, how much of a game changer would it be? Truly, think about this. How much of a game changer would it be if before we stepped into the conflict with somebody, we had already actually released that thing to the Lord and given it to Him, and we forgave Him? What if we had already forgiven the person that we're about to have a conversation with? And that would change everything. That will change the entire way that you're going to go into it, because you've already released that to the Lord, who commands us to forgive, by the way. And so the call of this verse is first that I would not let the sun go down while I'm still angry, but that I would let God deal with that, and that I would surrender that to Him. And someone said, how can we do that? I had a conversation down here. Someone's like, so how can we do that? And I said, well, man, as a Christian, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing, as His enemies were killing Him. And as He was dying on the cross for us, He forgave us before we ever came to Him. And so that's how. Because we have that ability, because we've experienced that. And when we've experienced that, we can pay that forward. But man, how much of a game changer would it be if the moment I stepped into the conversation with my wife, I had already forgiven her for the time that she hurt me? Man, it would change a lot of things for us, and I think it would lead to a lot of healthy things. But then, of course, you do want to pursue resolution. And this is what she does. She goes to the people in verse 8 and says, "O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, tell him that I'm sick with love, like I still love him. I want to work this out." And so we want to pursue resolution, which leads me to the next point. We want to fight for each other, not against each other. Fight for each other, not against each other. So in chapter 5, verse 2 to chapter 6, verse 3, we see beloved. He is called by her or the others beloved 17 times. In those short verses, 17 times it says that he's beloved. And that word beloved is the word dode that we talked about a couple weeks ago, that it means the mingling of souls. He's the one that I am one with. Nothing has changed. My commitment to him is still there. Like, I still love him very much. There's an established foundation of love here. And then we see in verse 16 that she says, "This is my beloved and this is my friend," that this is my best friend. And one day when you marry somebody, man, I pray that you're standing across from your best friend, that's the kind of relationship that you have. But she says, our friendship is still there. I still feel the same way about you. And then in chapter 6, verse 9, we see him, and he says, "You are my dove, my perfect one. You're the only one." Nothing has changed in how I feel about you. There's this established foundation as they step into this conflict. So my wife, whenever we got married, I think it was just a couple days before we got married, she got this letter from her sister. She wrote her this letter just giving some advice about marriage and stuff. And I don't remember hardly anything of the letter because I did read it. But I will never forget this one thing that she said, because her sister said this one piece of advice that stuck with me. She said, "When you fight, fight naked." And I was like, yes and amen. I was like, babe, we need to write that on the mirror, okay? And what was she saying? Like, she was saying it in a lighthearted way, but she was saying, hey, don't forget that this is the person that you're committing your life to. This is the person that you are one with, that's going to walk with you through the rest of this life together. This is your best friend. Don't forget that as you have these conflicts. But a lot of times what we do is we make it this me versus you battle is what it starts to become. And so for this next illustration, I'm going to have, actually, they recently got married a few months ago now, but Justin and Allison are going to come join us. So y'all give it up for them as they walk up. Okay. Oh, y'all aren't cool right now. No, y'all, this is the battling out. No. So you'll stand right here and just hold on right here. Okay. Just hold this right here. And I want you to pull her across the stage as hard as you can. I'm joking. Don't do that. Don't do that. And so y'all kind of lean back a little bit. Kind of give some tension on the rope. Give some tension. So this is what happens when it's me versus you. We start to experience the tension of this tug-of-war match that can sometimes start to happen in the relationships that we are in. And so it can be, by the way, this is kind of what takes place is you want to have tension in your marriage one day, then make sure you say things like you always. Like, man, you always leave the dishes in the sink, and you always do that over and over and over again, and you kind of leaning back to more tension now. And then say you never. And then you want to say, hey, you never listen to me. You're never listening to anything I want. And then there's just more and more tension, except there's not smiles on the face. And let's say this happens, okay? This is one of the most terrifying things that a woman can say to us. So he comes home and says, hey, babe, we're going to go hang out, me and the guys. It's going to be a little bit of a late night. We're going to watch UFC, and then we're going to kind of just hang out. I'll be home really, really late. And then she says this. This is scary. Fine. Fine. Guys, fine does not mean fine, okay? Fine. Now, fine can mean fine. Fine can mean fine like 2 thumbs up, like, okay, that's fine. But in a conflict, fine means fine like the officer's writing you a ticket and saying, fine, you will pay for this later on, okay? That's what it's actually like whenever you get into a relationship. And if you really want to just keep the tension going, what you really want to do is you want to assume the person's intentions before you actually ask them. Assume what they were thinking before you actually ask. And so let's say you come home one night and you're trying to give her a hug because you're excited to see your wife, and you go in and she kind of gives you one of those bro hugs, right? Like you want an actual hug from your wife, and she's like, hey, good to see you. And you're going, oh, what? Does she not value me? Does she not care about me? Right? So you assume the intention, and then so you're hanging out, right? And you're watching TV, having a good time, and you're thinking, okay, maybe whenever he gets home, I'm going to be able to really talk with him, and so you start to share about your day, right? The huge thing in a relationship, wouldn't you all agree? And as you're talking about your day, you see him kind of look up and to the right for about 60 seconds. And you assume, oh man, he must not care about what I'm saying right now. And by God, this is just true about guys. She has no idea that you just want some Cheetos and that you just really are hungry right now. But she's assumed this, and so there's all this tension going on. And man, like if you assume intention, it's going to lead to you being in tension. I studied all week just for that. Okay, so if you assume somebody's intention, it's always going to lead to you being in tension. But that's not how it's supposed to be. It's not you versus me. Instead, and you can drop the rope. Instead, it's supposed to be, oh, not you. And you can come over here with him. Instead, it's you and me. This is how we're actually supposed to go about conflict resolution. You and me versus the problem as we resolve this together. The goal of the argument or the goal of the fight or the conflict that you're in is not to win. It's to get resolution. It's not me versus you. It's me and you versus the problem. I think that's so key for us to get. Will y'all give them a hand? Thank y'all so much. So key for us to understand that, but that we would fight for each other, not against each other. Man, these things, assuming intention and the you always, you never, and just the understanding and misunderstandings that happen, all those things are bad deals, and we got to understand that, man, we don't want to fight to win. We want to fight for resolution. And did you notice that it started with them leaning on intention away from each other? It ends with them actually closer together. There is a way to go about conflict that at the end of it, you actually are closer together and stronger in your relationship. It's possible. And that's what I'm praying over us, that we would understand that. And as we end tonight, the last point is this: in conflict, remain committed. In conflict, remain committed. And so in chapter 6, verse 3, she says, I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. And this is a love that's staying. This intimacy between them is maintained. And then he says, you are beautiful as Tirzah, my love, lovely as Jerusalem. Jerusalem was their home base, and what he was just telling her is that, hey, you are a home base for me. Amen. That's the kind of marriage that you want one day, that person's home base for you. Now, how does this apply in dating that you are going to remain committed? As it closes out to say, hey, we're not fighting against each other. We're on the same team, as he says. It's not this dance between two armies. How does this apply to dating? Man, is this the type of conflict with the person that you're dating? Is this the type of conflict that you want to commit to? The question is not, will I marry conflict? The question is, what kind of conflict will I marry? Because we're going to marry into some conflict. And we all want this love that stays, this love that chooses that I'm here no matter what. And this is just something that, just for future reference, something that you never want to do in a marriage is you never want to even threaten divorce. That's a low blow that you just don't go there. That should be words that just aren't said in a marriage. According to what God would say, that you're not going to threaten that, but instead you're going to choose to love one another. There's a theologian and popular pastor that recently retired, but his name's Timothy Keller. And he says this, he says, our culture says that feelings of love, which are hard to have in the middle of conflict, are the basis for actions of love. And of course, that can be true. But it's truer to say that actions of love can lead consistently to feelings of love. Our culture is going to say feelings are going to lead to action, but biblically what it's going to teach us is actually actions are going to lead to feelings, that it is a choice. Love is a choice. I'm choosing to be committed to you. And committed action to love, it's going to cultivate the feelings that we all want in a strong marriage, that 15, 20, 30 years from now, that we have that kind of love that our grandkids have, that they want one day, rather, that when they are asked, what kind of love do you want, what kind of marriage do you want, that they will be able to point to your future marriage and say, one like that. That's what I want over this room, and that's what I want for my own life. And I think that this is going to help us get there. But as we close and as we answer this question, how do we really stay committed in love and have a love that lasts? Whenever I preach weddings, and I've preached several of them at this point in my ministry, I share about the Corinthian passage that talks about love, and at the end of that passage, it ends by saying, love never fails. But then I say, but here's the thing about the love that never fails. It's not y'all's love that never fails. It's the love of God that never fails. An unfailing love has an unfailing source, and the only unfailing source is the love of Jesus Christ, and that's going to be the love that holds your marriage together. In Colossians chapter 1, verse 17 says this, in him all things hold together. And that's going to be true for your marriage. His love is going to be the love that holds your love together one day. And by the way, his love is going to be what holds your life together. Because again, this isn't just what we're talking about right now in this moment is not just about our relationships. But I do want to challenge us that his power, it's going to hold every piece of your life together. But key phrase, he often holds the pieces of our life together that we're actually willing to give him. Are you willing to give him the dating piece of your life? Are you willing, and maybe for you it's not dating, maybe it's the place where you have a massive wound that you need healing from. Are you willing to give him that piece? Maybe you came in here and you said, man, there's multiple pieces in my life that I'm really struggling with here. And maybe Jesus is saying, like, listen, would you hand those pieces over to me? The truth of the matter is no matter how broken a person is, no matter how many pieces a person's life may be in, all of them can be picked up and made whole in Jesus because he's that good of a God. And he really does take broken things and put them back together. Matter of fact, what he did when he came, we're about to celebrate this on Tuesday night, the cross, Jesus was broken into pieces. Why? So that way he could put us back together. That's why he did that for us, because he loves us with that kind of love. And no matter how many pieces you are in, Jesus, he will put you back together, man. He will. But will you give him the piece? Because he often puts the pieces of our life back together that we're willing to give to him. Will you give him the piece or the pieces? You won't regret it. He was broken on the cross so he could put us back together. Let's pray. God, thank you that you are that kind of God. I pray over us, Lord. I pray that you would help us to grow in wisdom on dealing with conflict so we can have strong relationships in marriages and dating relationships. But Lord, no matter what it is that you want to meet us in right now. I pray that we would listen. And I pray that we would give you every piece. That way, in you, all things would be held together in our life. We thank you, Jesus. Let's worship.